Hi everybody. Today I wanted to talk about how we could use grouping and assessment in the math that we're doing. So today's video topic is certainly guided and directed towards teachers and giving them a little bit of information and possibly some advice about how they might go about doing their grouping and maybe even a little assessment during this time. Again, these are just my ideas and thoughts as a classroom teacher and as a math coach. So if you agree with some of the things that I'm talking about and you can take something small from it, that's great. If you disagree with it, that's great also and perfectly fine. What I want to do is talk a little bit about how things are looking. So I know the other day I had 11 out of my 13 students. It's a small group. Last year I had 27, so we know how that goes. I had 11 out of my 13 students present for a Zoom meeting, and while I was wonderfully excited about the large amount of students that I had, it was very difficult to manage not only the content, but the excitement and the needs that the individual students had. So one of the thoughts that really struck me after I finished was, why aren't I doing more groupings? It's exactly what I would do in my classroom, and it's exactly what the students need, and it's what I need to be doing in order to feel like my instruction and work that they're doing is set up in the best way possible for them. So what I might suggest for you is a couple of different things. Later today, I am going to survey the parents of the children in my classroom because they want to feel involved in the decisions that are happening, because let's face it, it's very different from our classrooms because it's happening in their home, and oftentimes they're going to be expected or even required to assist us with it. So we want to give the parents that opportunity to give some feedback. I wouldn't leave everything wide open and ask, what would you like to see? But what I'm going to include in the survey that I'm sending this afternoon is I am going to send them a survey asking if their child would like to be a part of a group. And that group is going to be a math group, a science group, a social studies group, a writing group, or a reading group. They can choose any number of groups to be in, or they could choose one group to be in that they really prefer. That's also not only going to give the parents a feeling of validation and like you are respecting and understanding what their needs might be, but it's also going to give the students a little bit of power of choice. We know that we're going to have some students who are going to want to be in all groups, and that's fine. We're also going to have some students who are going to want to be in one group, and that's fine as well. The next thing that I'm going to do is inform the parents that the amount of time used for each call is going to decrease, but the opportunity for more calls will increase. So instead of trying to manage a 1-hour call with 11 students, I would much prefer, and I'm sure it's going to run a lot easier, to run 2 calls that are 30 minutes long, or 3 calls that are 20 minutes long, or 4 calls that are 15 minutes long. Again, giving the opportunity for the amount of time that you're using to decrease, but the opportunities for you to get your eyes on your students and for your students to get their eyes on you will increase. What should also increase during that time, and we know that from the groupings that we do in our classrooms, is the ability to get to the work and get to the task in a more effective way. So again, just some suggestions, thinking about a lot of us want to bring our classrooms into our homes, and that's really hard for us to do. So just the idea of going back to groupings was a really powerful kind of aha moment that I had. I'll keep you updated and posted about it and talk a little bit more about it as it kind of gets going and gets rolling. I would suggest that to start, you do your groupings in more of an interest way and then see how they unfold, and then you can start making your groupings to be more towards the academic levels of the students. If you find that it's going really well right from the beginning, or you feel as though your students would benefit from that right away, then I would suggest doing types of academic grouping ones. I would also suggest, though, that you not make yourself crazy and that you limit the time and really work on one skill or strategy or topic for the day, and don't try to make it something crazy. Don't set yourself up for 4 1-hour meetings. Don't set yourself up for 17 20-minute meetings. Make it so that it's manageable for you also. The next thing that I wanted to talk about today was assessment. A lot of that is starting to kind of percolate into the conversations and emails that we're probably receiving. So again, my ideas, my thoughts, my suggestions would be for you to take the opportunity to do a 15-minute call for each of your students. If you have a huge group of students, don't do that. You can send out a survey. If your students are older, you can send out a survey as well. So the thinking that I'm looking at is for the younger elementary grades. And I'd even include, actually I'd include probably all of the elementary grades. So from preschool up to 6th grade. What I would suggest that you try to do, and you can try to do this over the course of 1 or 2 days, is to really pick what you'd like to work on as your assessment. Do you want to do a reading assessment? Do you want to do a math assessment? For me, and for this particular video, the target is going to be the math assessment, because I think it's probably the most authentic way that we might be able to collect information. Reading is a little bit different. How you're going to get them their copy of whatever they're going to be using for their fluency check. How are you going to make sure that they can hear the timer? Are they distracted? All those kinds of things. But this brings me right back to my math activities. Yes, they are games, but we call them math activities because it slightly changes the process of the students when they're working on them, because they don't necessarily connect it to a game, and a game is going to be easy and fun and silly. Are they easy? Are they fun? Absolutely. But by calling it an activity, it makes it a lot more powerful in the student's mind, and it makes it a better opportunity for you to work on and learn a lot more about what your students are working on. So I would suggest using these math activities in a one-on-one or a one-on-two situation on one of your calls as a way to get an idea as to where they're at and what they're working on. We all have a general idea of where students were when we left off. Maybe you even were able to grab some of your assessments, or you have them electronically available to you now, and that's great. If you don't, that's fine also too. Do not make yourself crazy. Do not start making assessments, but think about what you want to look at from the student's perspective. Once you've discovered what you want to look at from the student's perspective, think about what math activity would relate itself to looking at that particular skill or strategy or ability level in your student. For me, I am just finishing my, just finishing my division unit, and we were about to work on moving towards fractional thinking. So what I'm going to be looking at for the kids is I'm going to be going back to multiplication and division and making sure that they understand not only what those operations are, but what the amounts represent and how to work effectively with those operations and the connections between them. We can then take that thinking into fractional work as well. So what are some math activities that I might do with them? Well, most of the time, I'm probably going to be using a deck of cards. I suggest you use a deck of cards as often as possible because it's likely students will have them at home. And if they don't have them, it's a really easy visual for you to share and for them to provide feedback. Dice also work great, but they're smaller, so you have to make sure that you're holding them and then hold them up to the camera. But again, the choice is yours. Use whatever material you're most comfortable with. What I would do for my students would be a variety of different things. I might, just to get an idea of their sort of fact fluency, and remember that fact fluency doesn't just include speed. It doesn't. It also includes, what do they know about the fact? What do they know about the pieces of the fact? How can they work with that particular fact? So you could do something simple like drawing 2 cards and asking them to multiply that. You could ask them to draw 2 cards and put together a model of how that might look for multiplication or division. So again, you are going to have an opportunity to see their thinking, or you can have a conversation with them where you can hear their thinking, and then you can best guide your math decisions going forward from there. There are lots of different things that you can do with them, and there are lots of different ways that you can assess them where you don't have to do a timed drill, or you don't have to log them onto whatever program you're using or buy a program for them to be able to use. Also going back to remembering that important piece to fluency. Fluency is not just drilling mathematicians. It's not. It's not at the 3rd grade level either, where we start working with multiplication and division. Yes, students need to have a faster automaticity with the fact, or with those basic multiplication facts, just like they needed that with basic addition facts. But the students don't need to be drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled. They also need to start working on some other strategies. What do I understand? Because that's really the goal of math at this point, is we're looking at, and it really should have been all along, we're looking at what does the mathematician themselves understand and how do they show it? Can they show it in an effective way? So just to recap what we talked about today, we are thinking about how could we group our students and possibly using shorter amounts of time, but doing calls over a larger quantity of time. So instead of one 1 hour call each day with 14 to 20 kids or 15 kids, try to narrow that down. Again, I am going to be working with grouping them first by what the kids pick, and I'm only going to be doing that for a week. And let's face it, what do we have more than right now? We have time. Okay, so if it's a decision that you make and you find that it flops and it really doesn't work, then the next time you can make the groupings instead of allowing the students or the families to sort of suggest or pick what they'd like to do. But also remember, there's a lot of power in allowing others to feel like their thoughts and opinions are validated. And I'm, again, not saying allow the parents to choose exactly what you want to do or what you're going to do, but give them the opportunity to provide some feedback. Because at this point, they have seen their child working, or they've seen their child not working, or they've seen their child struggling. So we want to do these kinds of things as the best way to sort of bridge the gap between being at school, where we're in charge of and directing so much, and being at home, where we're playing now more of a supporting role, even though we are still in charge of educating the students. The other thing is assessment. So if you are being asked or required even, because it's likely that that's possible also, to do assessments, do those assessments in a way that gives you an opportunity to either hear or see, or if you can, both, what the kids are doing. Start with exactly what you know they were working on before. So again, for my class, it's going to be multiplication and division, and making sure that I can work with them in small ways to deepen that understanding before we move on to their fractional thinking. Thanks so much. Happy mathing.